Okay, be honest with me here. It is what, 6:30 in the morning, the alarm just went off, it is still dark outside,
Mhm.
your brain feels like it is wrapped in thick, heavy wool, you stumble into the kitchen, you fumble with the machine, and then that smell hits you.
Oh, yeah.
That first sip, and suddenly the dashboard lights in your mind start flickering on. For me, and I suspect for you listening, that ritual is non-negotiable, but there's always that little nagging voice in the back of my head, is this a vice? Am I just dependent on a stimulant,
Mhm.
or is there a world where I am actually doing something good for myself?
It is the eternal question, isn't it?
Yeah.
We tend to view our reliance on caffeine with this strange mix of gratitude and guilt.
Right.
We love the energy, but we worry about the cost. What if
Yes.
that morning cup wasn't just waking you up for the day? What if it was actually helping your brain stay awake for the decades to come?
See, that is the dream scenario. That is what I tell myself when I'm brewing the third cup. But usually, when I see headlines like, coffee cures everything, I click the link and find out it was a study of 12 mice in a basement in 1994.
Right.
So today we are digging into something different. We are looking at a massive piece of research titled Caffeine Consumption and Long-Term Cognitive Resilience. The mission here is simple. Does my coffee habit actually protect me against dementia and cognitive decline, or
Yeah.
am I just borrowing energy from tomorrow?
Well, I wouldn't go printing a certificate of perfect health just yet, but the data here is incredibly compelling.
Hmm.
However, the story isn't quite as simple as drink more coffee.
Oh.
The devil is in the details,
Mhm.
specifically regarding what kind of coffee you're drinking.
Okay, I sense a plot twist coming later, but let's start with the credibility check.
Okay.
Because I am skeptical by nature when it comes to nutrition studies. They are notoriously messy. People lie about what they eat or they misremember, so what makes this study worth our time?
You are right to be skeptical. Nutritional epidemiology is tough. But this study it's a titan in the field.
A titan.
Yeah, I mean, if we connect this to the bigger picture of how we track human health,
Mm-hmm.
sample size is everything. This study looked at a total of 131,821 participants.
Okay, 130,000 people. That is a solid data set. That's the population of a small city.
It is.
But big numbers can just mean a lot of noise if the data is bad. Who were these people?
They weren't just random volunteers. The researchers pulled from two of the most respected cohorts in medical history. The Nurses' Health Study, which gave us data on over 86,000 female participants,
Okay.
and the Health Professionals Follow-Up Study, which included about 45,000 men.
So these are nurses and health professionals, people who presumably know how to fill out a form and might actually pay attention to what they're putting in their bodies.
Exactly. And the duration is what really sets this apart. This wasn't a snapshot where they asked them what they drank last Tuesday.
Right.
This was a prospective cohort study with a follow-up period of up to 43 years. We are talking about tracking people's habits from the 1980s all the way through 2023.
43 years. That is insane. I can barely remember to fill out a survey for a free sandwich, let alone report my diet for 40 years. But how did they actually track the coffee drinking?
So this is key.
Was it just memory recall at the end? Hey, how much coffee did you drink in 1985? Because if so, the data is useless.
No, and that's a key point for the validity here. They used validated food frequency questionnaires that were collected every 2 to 4 years.
Ah, so they were checking in constantly.
Constantly. So they were getting real-time updates on how people's habits changed over decades.
Mhm.
And crucially, at the start of the study, none of these participants had cancer, Parkinson's disease, or dementia.
Okay, so a clean slate at the beginning. That's important because it rules out the idea that sick people stopped drinking coffee, skewing the numbers.
Okay.
So we have a massive group of healthy people. We're watching them for a lifetime, and we're checking in constantly. Fast forward to the end. What happened?
Well, this brings us to the primary outcome. And unfortunately, it involves a grim statistic. Over the course of those decades, researchers identified 11,033 cases of incident dementia.
That is a heavy number. 11,000 cases.
It is. These were identified through death records and physician diagnoses. But having that many cases gives the study immense statistical power. It allows us to compare the groups with high precision.
Okay.
And the metric they used to measure this was person years.
Hold on. Person years? I see that in studies all the time. Can we pause and explain that? Is that just counting the people?
Not quite. It's a measure of time and population combined. Think of it this way. If you track 10 people for 10 years, that is 100 person years.
Got it.
It accounts for the fact that people enter and leave the study at different times. In this study, they had millions of person years of data.
So it's the sheer volume of life being observed.
Precisely. So they compare the fourth quartile, the people with the highest consumption, against the first quartile, the lowest consumption, the heavy hitters versus the abstainers.
If I'm chugging espresso, am I safer than the person drinking herbal tea?
In the raw numbers, yes, significantly. The high intake group saw 141 cases of dementia per 100,000 person years.
Okay.
The low intake group saw 330 cases.
Wait, 330 versus 141, that is less than half. The rate of dementia in the heavy coffee drinkers was less than half the rate of the non-drinkers.
It's a huge difference.
That seems too good to be true. There has to be a catch. Maybe the coffee drinkers were just wealthier, or they exercised more.
That is exactly the kind of question you should ask. Coffee drinkers often have different lifestyles, so the researchers adjusted for smoking, physical activity, diet quality, alcohol, BMI,
The usual suspect.
all the standard confounders. And even after stripping all those away, the hazard ratio was 0.82.
Okay, translate hazard ratio for us non-statisticians.
Well, a hazard ratio of 1.0 means there is no difference between the groups. Anything below 1.0 suggests a protective effect.
So lower is better.
Lower is better. A 0.82 means there was a statistically significant association with a lower risk. Roughly speaking, an 18% lower risk of developing dementia after all adjustments.
18%, that is still huge. In the world of nutrition, we usually fight over a 2% or 3% difference.
Oh, absolutely.
An 18% reduction in something as devastating as dementia is massive.
It is highly significant. And what makes this paper even more robust is that they didn't just look at the binary of dementia or no dementia,
Right?
because that's the end stage.
Right.
Most people listening right now aren't worried about a diagnosis tomorrow. They're worried about the slide. The senior moments.
Yeah.
Walking into a room and forgetting why you're there.
Exactly. The cognitive fog. Did the study look at that gray area before the disease hits?
They did. They measured something called subjective cognitive decline. They asked participants to score themselves on a scale of 0 to 7 based on whether they felt they were slipping. If they scored a 3 or higher, they were considered a case. And again, high caffeinated coffee intake was associated with a lower prevalence of this decline.
But hold on, subjective means self-reported. Can we trust people to self-diagnose their own brain fog? Maybe the coffee drinkers are just more alert, or maybe they're just more optimistic.
That is a fair critique. Self-reporting is always a bit fuzzy. But that's why the nurses' health study cohort is so valuable.
Okay.
For a subset of these women, they didn't just ask, how do you feel? They actually performed objective tests. They used the TITCS, the telephone interview, for cognitive status.
So a literal pop quiz for your brain over the phone?
Essentially, they did neuropsychological tests to measure memory and mental status, and the results tracked with subjective data. Higher coffee intake correlated with higher mean TASIA scores. The difference was about 0.11 points.
0.11, that sounds tiny. That sounds like a rounding error. Why should we care about 0.11?
In isolation, it looks small. But think of it like a batting average in baseball. The difference between a .280 hitter and a .300 hitter looks small on paper. But over a season, it defines the difference between an average player and a Hall of Famer.
Okay, that's a good analogy.
Across a population of tens of thousands, a .11 shift in cognitive function suggests a widespread preservation of neurons. It's the difference between living independently a few years longer or not.
Okay, that puts it in perspective.
Yeah.
So we have the subjective feeling of being sharper, the objective test scores showing you are sharper, and the diagnosis data showing you're less likely to get dementia.
Right.
All arrows point to coffee. But, and here's where I want to push back. Why? Because for years we've been told it's the antioxidants, right? Coffee is a plant. It's full of polyphenols. Is that what's saving our brains?
This is where we get to the most critical distinction in the entire paper. This is the plot twist.
Nah, here we go.
The researchers wanted to isolate the variable, so they looked specifically at decaffeinated coffee.
The decaf drinkers. The people who want the taste without the buzz. What happened to them?
Nothing.
Zero association. The study found that decaffeinated coffee intake was not associated with lower dementia risk or better cognitive performance. The hazard ratio was flat. The cognitive scores didn't move.
Wow. Okay, stop. That is huge. Because that rips apart the eat your veggies narrative for coffee. If it was the antioxidants or the bean itself, decaf should work just as well.
Precisely. If you take the caffeine out, you remove the benefit. This strongly suggests that the driver of this cognitive resilience is not the healthy plant matter. It is the drug. It is the caffeine itself.
That is mind-blowing. We're basically saying that a psychoactive stimulant is neuroprotective. How does that even work? I mean, I know it wakes me up, but how does it stop dementia?
It likely comes down to the mechanism of how caffeine interacts with the brain. We know caffeine blocks adenosine receptors. Adenosine is the chemical that builds up during the day to make you feel tired.
Right. But those receptors also play a role in inflammation and excitotoxicity, which is basically when your neurons get overexcited and damage themselves.
So by blocking those receptors, caffeine isn't just keeping you awake, it's shielding the neurons.
That is the leading hypothesis. It may reduce neuroinflammation and protect the blood-brain barrier. There are also animal studies showing caffeine can reduce the accumulation of amyloid beta,
The plaque.
the plaque associated with Alzheimer's. The fact that decaf failed to show protection really puts the spotlight on these biological mechanisms.
And I assume this is good news for tea drinkers too, or are they out of luck?
No, they are very much in luck.
Yeah.
The study looked at tea consumption as well. And because tea contains caffeine, it showed similar positive associations. The pattern held up.
So it really is the engine, not the car. Coffee and tea are just the delivery systems for the caffeine our brains apparently crave.
Exactly.
So logically, if I double my intake to 6 cups, I'm doubling my protection, right? I should just hook myself up to an IV of espresso and I'll be a genius forever.
I know you're joking, but that is a dangerous assumption that people actually make. The answer is a definitive no.
Oh.
More is not always better. The study found what we call nonlinear inverse associations.
Nonlinear, meaning the graph isn't a straight line up.
Correct. It's often referred to as a J-curve. You see a benefit as intake goes up, but then it plateaus, and if you go too high, the benefit can disappear or even reverse.
Why does it drop off? Is it toxicity?
It's likely a mix of factors. At very high doses, caffeine disrupts sleep quality. And we know that deep sleep is when the brain cleans itself of toxins. So if you drink so much coffee that you aren't sleeping, you're undoing the benefits.
That makes sense.
Plus, high anxiety and cardiovascular stress can be factors.
Okay, so we need to find the sweet spot. What did the data say was the magic number?
For caffeinated coffee, the most pronounced benefits, the bottom of that curve where risk was lowest, was observed at an intake of approximately 2 to 3 cups per day.
2 to 3 cups. That is incredibly reasonable. That's a morning cup and a mid-morning top-up.
It is. For tea, because the caffeine content is usually lower, the sweet spot was roughly 1 to 2 cups, though the data for tea is often a bit noisier depending on the type.
Right.
But the takeaway is moderation. You don't need to hypercaffeinate. You just need a consistent, moderate exposure.
And we should clarify what a cup is, right? Because my cup at home is the size of a soup bowl.
A very important distinction. In scientific literature, a cup is almost always 8 ounces. If you are going to a coffee shop and ordering a venti, that is 20 ounces.
Oh, wow.
That is 2.5 cups right there. So one large coffee shop drink basically hits your daily quota for maximum benefit.
That is good to know. I'm probably overdosing without realizing it. So if we step back and look at this whole picture, we have a 43-year study, 130,000 people, showing that caffeine, specifically the drug caffeine, keeps dementia at bay and keeps our brains sharper. This feels like a massive win for my morning routine.
It is a strong finding, but I have to do my job here
Yeah.
and add the caveat.
Of course.
This is an observational study. It proves association, not causation. We can't say for 100% certainty that the coffee caused the brain protection. It is possible that people with healthier brains just naturally prefer coffee.
That healthy brain bias.
Exactly. Maybe if your brain is starting to decline, you stop liking the taste of coffee or the caffeine makes you feel worse, so you quit. That's called reverse causality.
However,
However, the fact that they controlled for so many variables, the fact that they started with healthy people, the fact that decaf showed no benefit, and the fact that there is a plausible biological mechanism involving adenosine, all of this builds a very, very strong case.
yeah.
It moves the needle from interesting coincidence to likely protective strategy.
It's convincing enough for me. And frankly, unlike some experimental longevity drug that costs a fortune and might grow a third ear on my forehead, coffee is something billions of us have been safety testing for centuries.
That's the practical takeaway. If you tolerate caffeine well, if it doesn't give you the shakes or ruin your sleep, this study suggests there is no reason to stop and a very strong reason to keep brewing.
I love it. So for you listening right now, if you're holding that warm mug, don't look at it with suspicion. That ritual isn't just waking you up, it's armor. It's likely helping you stay you for a lot longer.
And if you are a tea drinker, you are in the same boat. Consistency over decades seems to be the winning formula.
Consistency over decades. I think I can manage that. But before we wrap up, I want to leave you with a thought that's been bugging me since we talked about the decaf thing.
Go on.
We spend so much time in the health world talking about whole foods and natural states and how processing is bad. But here, the benefit was tied strictly to the drug, the caffeine, not the wholesome part of the bean.
Mm-hmm.
It makes you wonder, what else are we missing? If our brains specifically need this chemical interaction to maintain resilience, are there other engines hiding in plain sight?
That is the provocative question. Are we biologically wired to need these specific stimulants to age gracefully? And what other keys are out there that fit the locks of our long-term health?
Something to mull over while you pour your second cup. Thanks for diving in with us.
Always a pleasure.
See you on the next deep dive.